Good evening, Tansei, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. It was another dramatic day for the Inuit delegation from Nunavut chasing a fugitive priest in France. The delegation was told that Johannes Revoir, who spent 30 years as a missionary in Nunavut, would meet with them after lunch. The media was not allowed into the meeting in Lyon, but Oblate official Father Vincent Gruber confirmed that Revoir met some of his accusers. When APTN's Kathleen Martins asked if he believed the victims, Gruber responded yes. Gruber said Revoir reminisced about his time in Nunavut, but denied he sexually abused Inuit children. The accusers did not meet with reporters to say what it was like to confront the alleged abuser of nearly 50 years ago. The delegation is continuing its efforts to bring Revoir back to Canada to face trial. In the aftermath of the September 4th stabbing rampage at the James Smith Cree Nation and town of Weldon in Saskatchewan, community members are holding funerals this week for those who died. According to the Saskatchewan Health Authority, there are 4 survivors of the attack still in hospital, all of whom are in stable condition. Since Sunday, 13 patients from the stabbing incident have been released from hospitals in various locations around the province. Saskatchewan health authorities are not saying which hospitals. Call it the cash cow of Quebec. There are at least 13 hydroelectric dams present on what was once the ancestral Innu territory of Pessamit. For years, the community has pushed for compensation and inclusion, but is there light at the end of the tunnel? This week, Shushan Bécon brings us a 3-part series looking at the relationship between Hydro-Quebec and the Pessamit. Here's a part 1, translated and voiced by Lindsay Richardson.
Si tu savais comme on s'ennuie à la manée.
It's rare that a hydroelectric dam is impressive enough to inspire poetry. But here in Quebec, the Manic 5 Dam is an exception.
Tu m'écrirais bien plus souvent à la manie coagan.
It's become fodder for folk music, like this Georges d'Or classic from 1966. Even today, people come from out of town seeking it specifically.
C'est un emblème québécois, dans le fond. Ça représente une grande réussite pour le Québec, là, je pense, là, avec l'hydroélectrique. Puis c'est impressionnant à voir, là, c'est un beau mur.
But the dam was constructed in 1959 on ancestral Innu territory belonging to the members of Pessamit, 250 kilometers from the dam. It was at this time of year that the Innu prepared to mark the August 15th celebrations, a time when the community's hunters headed into the bush for a 10-month excursion. For many, this period of time seems far away today.
J'ai 52. Oh, yeah.
For Cécile Bacon, it was bingo night at home with family, a far cry from her upbringing on the territory. This spot is where they were heading, the final destination after a month-long voyage by canoe, navigating local waterways.
Wamastani higadoni de do ere loano ne manixing no hotam ketokno wamastani higati nikapata when ne hagi inkata ya chimen kwani higati ne chimen kwa
Adélard Benjamin works in territorial and resource management for Pessamit. He points out how it's difficult to ignore the influence of Innu culture on local toponymy. For example, the name of the reservoir, Manicouagan, is an Innu word, taken from Menequan, a specific word used to describe an Innu who sips water from the tip of his oar.
Le Québec s'est enrichi de nos rivières et puis c'est on va dire, c'est le vache à lait du Québec, tous les barrages hydroélectriques. Mais nous, rien de ça, 0 et 1 barre de ces profits-là.
Benjamin feels the Innu are inexistent to Hydro-Quebec, noting that Hydro's commemorative plaques and reference material make no mention of the families who once occupied the lands.
Tous ces réservoirs-là, toutes ces rivières-là, comme on dit souvent, c'est des autoroutes qui nous amenaient sur nos territoires. jusqu'à la Kaniapisco.
Benjamin says Pessamit and Hydro-Quebec are working to correct these historical oversights. And despite the strain of her nomadic childhood, Cécile Bacon looks back on it fondly, summing up her relationship with Hydro-Quebec in one sentence. Coming up, we'll take a look at the history of the agreements between Hydro-Quebec and the Innu Nation and what reparations, if any, are to come. A story by Shashan Bacon, APTN National News, Pessamit, Quebec.
All right, we have to step aside for a short break, but still to come, the University of King's College in Halifax is sweetening the pot to get Mi'kmaq students into its journalism program. Details next. Welcome back. While preparations are being made for Queen Elizabeth's funeral, her relationship with Indigenous people is being discussed around the Commonwealth. Negon Sinclair wrote in the Winnipeg Free Press how the Queen's reign was marred by 70 years of inaction on Indigenous issues. He joined Melissa Ridgen earlier this week to expand on his opinion.
Negon, thanks for being here. We're always happy to hear from you. For starters, how did you feel about the passing of Queen Elizabeth II? You wrote about it. Not everybody, our APTN audience here, is reading the Free Press, so if you could just give us a rundown about your thoughts on her death.
Well, I mean, she was a matriarch. She was a mother, a grandmother, a wife. And I think, all of us feel the pain of that family, regardless of who it is. And then at the same time, the Queen's ruled for 70 years. That's 7 decades. Canada's only been in existence for a little over 150 years. So almost half of the existence of Canada, Queen Elizabeth reigned over this country. And so we have to remember that this Queen reigned over some of the most brutal and draconian, violent times in Canadian history, and was in a position to do something about it, but chose to do nothing. To support the Canadian government in their ongoing theft of lands, the delivery of the residential school system, the imposition of the Indian Act. And so it's a very complicated relationship with the Queen. I think Indigenous peoples take seriously the role of the monarchy. We respect the Crown. Of course, the Crown is how we share a relationship with the country. And so we go to the Supreme Court, we have to talk about the Crown. We want the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor General at those meetings when we have with the Prime Minister. But at the same time, it's been a very complicated relationship with Queen Elizabeth.
Absolutely. In the column you talked about pictures of the Queen and Hello magazines laying around homes of family members growing up, but you being an activist when the Queen visited in 2010, can you talk about the divisiveness of the monarch for First Nations people like yourself? I mean, you said it's a complicated relationship, but for most people, it's like multiple layers of complication, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that was my experience growing up. I remember in 1984, when the Queen came to Winnipeg, my relatives taking me around to the gathering just so that we had a glimpse of the monarch, of the Queen. And also when Prince Charles came back in, about a decade ago and just this past year. People take seriously the role of the Crown, and in Canada, the royalty is generally considered celebrities, I think, not just for Canadians, but also for Indigenous peoples as well. Yeah. During the 22 national visits that the Queen took over her 70-year reign, every single stop, Indigenous peoples were there. And we were there to present our issues that Canada was taking up with us, and to remind the Queen that she has a legal obligation, a responsibility to intervene when Canada doesn't hold their end of the treaties, when they steal land or take away our children or violate Indigenous rights so that we have to go to the Supreme Court. Every single stop. And I can remember right here in Manitoba in 1970, although I wasn't alive then, but I can remember in researching this when I was a student. In 1970, Dave Kershane Sr. Was in the PAW and gave a speech directly to the Queen and said, what are you doing about all of these issues involving treaty? What are you doing about the fact that our children are suffering? What are you doing about the fact that our communities are in dire poverty while Canadians are so rich? And at that time she said, I will do something about it, or I will listen to your grievances and I will take that to the Prime Minister. But of course none of that happened. And so, like I said, it's a complicated relationship with Queen Elizabeth.
Now let's jump ahead to your thoughts. King Charles, he's long been an advocate of Indigenous ways. He's a climate activist himself in some respects, as much as the monarch could be. Do you expect that there's going to be some sort of a change within the Crown's relationship with Indigenous people under King Charles III?
Yeah, I just want to address what you just said there just for a second. People want to say, the monarch doesn't mean anything. It's symbolic, or it's in name only. Well, then why have it? And the real problem is that we have to go to the Supreme Court. We have to go to every single Governor General meeting in which he calls to us, because we take seriously as Indigenous peoples the role of the Crown. And I think Canadians should take that seriously as well, too. It's not just something that's an ornament or a symbolicness. And if you see the role of Lieutenant Governors and Governor Generals, I think they understand that role better than everyday Canadians. Mary Simon, as an example, the first Indigenous Governor General, she takes very seriously that she has the ear of the Prime Minister and that she can do things. When the Pope visited this country, the Mary Simon was the one who chided the Pope to say, you have to earn a relationship with us. You can't just walk right in and expect it to happen. So that being said, we have King Charles now, and King Charles III. All signs point to a more friendlier monarch than perhaps one that was ambivalent in the past. And so what we've got here is we've got somebody who has a track record of speaking about Indigenous issues. In fact, last May in the North said that, you know, if we want to deal with climate change, and he said this directly to the Canadian Prime Minister, you have to listen to Indigenous people.
Right.
And I mean, that's a good sign, but at the same time, I mean, I think we're all sick and tired of pleasant words and platitudes and statements. We want to see action. And what is it that this king will do when it comes to the issue of consultation or the issue of the ongoing challenge of the doctrine of discovery or you know, this upcoming implementation of Indigenous rights, which is supposed to happen with Bill C-15? It's not that the monarch can control what's happened in Canada, but certainly has a role to play in guiding Canada to honor treaties that the Crown signed 150 plus years ago.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us to discuss this. I guess we will all just wait with bated breath and see what this new king brings to us here in Canada. Thanks so much, Nigan.
Yeah, Miigwech, thanks.
The University of King's College in Halifax is sweetening the pot to get Mi'kmaq students into its journalism program. The 5-year program is putting money towards mentoring and tuition. Former APTN journalist Trina Roche is a professor at King's and is part of the program. She joins us from Halifax. Trina, thanks so much for taking a few minutes today to speak with us about this.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us about this mentorship program that the University of King's College is setting up.
It's a tuition waiver for up to 3 students a year for the next 6 years. So basically, it's just removing that barrier of financial costs for that student, their family, their community, and hoping to encourage Mi'kmaq students to come to King's, to consider journalism as an option, because right now we're really not represented in a strong way in the field of journalism. So we're hoping that this helps remedy that and entice students to consider journalism as a career.
And on that note, Trina, why has it been such a challenge to entice, Mi'kmaq and other Indigenous students to King's and other universities, for that matter, and in this case specifically journalism?
Yeah, I've often wondered that. I don't know that I have a good answer on what the barriers are. I think, I worked for APTN for so long, and I, for decades really, and I remember wandering around reserves with my camera as a video journalist by myself, covering stories where other media weren't there, but also not really seeing, like a handful of other Mi'kmaq journalists over the years, but not in strong numbers. And I always wondered why we weren't there. But sometimes I think it's just about representation. So if you don't see yourself reflected in mainstream media, maybe you don't see that as an opportunity for you. So I think, encouraging, students to come, especially as a cohort, because I think that's the other barrier is challenging to come from maybe a small community or First Nation, and then be by yourself. And not sort of have peers around you. And so the cohort idea is a great way to sort of at least have a little sense of community while you're going through this experience. And journalism, it's an intense program, but Mi'kmaq people and students, I say people, I shouldn't say just students, because there could be someone who's older. Certainly we're going to be trying to recruit high school students, but it could be someone looking to come back to school. And so I'm not sure what the barriers are, but certainly financial barriers are an easy sort of way to say, hey, at least you don't have to worry about this. Hopefully you'll have peers with you, and I'm hoping it works. We're hoping for 2023 to have the first cohort.
Well, APTN is certainly paying attention to this program, and so what kinds of things does King's need to do to be able to make this a success and for it to continue on?
I think King's, like other journalism programs, is trying to meet those TRC recommendations, that call to action that was really aimed specifically at journalism programs. And part of that is to make sure all students graduating from journalism programs have a fundamental understanding of Indigenous histories and cultures and the legacy of residential schools. But it's also, the TRC really recognized the power of media to shape the narrative, to to influence public opinion and attitudes towards things like reconciliation. So for journalism programs, it's really important that the classroom is diverse, that Mi'kmaq voices are represented in that task of shaping the narrative and informing the public. Like, we know what stories we want to tell. There are stories. We know how best to tell them. So I think King's is very much about making a space and having that support. And making sure that Mi'kmaq perspectives are also reflected in curriculum is a really important way that we can make sure that students feel supported while they're there. And we have also Dallas Housey, because we're part of that campus. They have Indigenous student services. There's programs sort of underway to make sure that students feel supported while they're coming to King. So that's an important aspect. But we just want to get them here and make sure that we have representation and maybe future APTN employees.
Well, let's certainly hope so. Trina, we'll have to leave it there, but we definitely appreciate you coming on and talking about this program, and best of luck in the future with it as well.
Yeah, well, Alan, thank you for having me.
All right, it's time for one final break, but still ahead. The city of Yellowknife finally has a permanent visitor center after years without one.
Walking into the gallery space, it was pretty amazing to see my art looking like art up on the walls. I had such a great space for artists in Yellowknife and hopefully the Northwest Territories.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. APTN News' very own Alan McKay took this photo of the Manitoba Legislative Building while riding atop the Ferris wheel at the Medifest in downtown Winnipeg. Great shot there, Alan. We want to see your great photos by sending them to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning over in East, 13 in Charlottetown and 16 in Halifax. 9 degrees in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and 13 in Cartwright. 16 degrees in Quebec City and sun and 17 in Montreal. 24 in sun in Sarnia, and 17 in North Bay. 12 degrees and some clouds in Timmins, and 18 in Big Trout Lake. 16 and a mix of sun and cloud in Churchill, and 18 and clear in Norway House. 17 in Barons River, and 17 in Winnipeg. 19 in Swift Current, and 20 in North Battleford. 21 degrees in Buffalo Narrows, and clear and 18 in Stony Rapids. As we make our way west, 21 and clear in High Level, and 23 in Peace River. 21 in Edmonton, and 21 in Calgary. 22 degrees in Campbell River, and 22 in Quesnel. 18 degrees in Smithers, and 21 in Fort Nelson. 13 in Beaver Creek, and 9 in Old Crow. 13 in Norman Wells, and 18 in clear in Yellowknife. 9 degrees in Fort McPherson, and 10 degrees in Colville Lake. -1 in Cambridge Bay, and 7 in Chesterfield. 4 degrees in Arctic Bay, and 9 degrees in Iqaluit. After 5 years of no permanent visitor center, the city of Yellowknife now has a space to welcome its guests. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings you that story.
It's been years in the making, planning and developing Sambake Yellowknife's new visitor center.
The way in which we've used the moss wall, it gives this really nice earthy feeling while still having, we've got concrete floors that just emulate, the outdoors where we have bedrock everywhere, and it's very northern, it's very rustic, and I enjoy that feel that's in here.
The new center comes after the demolition of the old visitor center, which was vacated in 2017 and torn down in 2020 due to structural issues. A small temporary center was operated out of City Hall, but Deputy Mayor Stacey Smith says this new center pays homage to Indigenous culture.
Because tourism is pretty much our number one at this point, seeing as the mines are slowly going out. So to be able to have this as a starting point, because everybody starts off in Yellowknife, and whether or not they decide to take a tour to Fort Good Hope or go to Lutzel Cay, they start off here. They want to see where all the great events are, which company to go with, all the different things they can do. This is a great welcoming space to be able to have available.
Along with an Aurora gallery, the center also features a non-commercial gallery space. It's the first time Mila Nakeko is seeing some of her art on a gallery's wall.
Walking into the gallery space, it was pretty amazing to see my art looking like art up on the walls. I had such a great space for artists in Yellowknife and hopefully the Northwest Territories.
Nakeko's figurative paintings make up the first curated show here.
Well, there's a lot of people in my paintings that are from Yellowknife and the North that people would recognize, and I think that's important to see ourselves reflected in work, in art.
The city says they chose to have the new center in a quiet downtown mall with the hopes of revitalizing the downtown core.
Before COVID, we were seeing about 5,000 to 6,000 a month, some months. Imagine what that could do in the downtown. So we have, thousands of visitors coming through, and they're looking around and they see things they like, and it's like, oh, maybe I'll go get a coffee there, and maybe I'll walk to the store there. And we really see this being a driver to send tourists out into the city.
To ensure the city is not in direct competition with local businesses, the center will also not sell anything, but rather promote and recommend shops, artists, and operators for goods and services. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. For more Indigenous news, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. For all of us here, thank you for joining us. Miigwech, and have a great night.